I'm ready to tell my story. My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and before I died, I was the most famous filmmaker in the world. My films were like Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window. They loved looking.
And how would you like us to look at your films in the 21st century, Alfred?
I'd like you to look at Janet in that lonely, remote shower and see yourself in her hope, your vulnerability.
You certainly wanted us to look at faces and desire, didn't you? Your movies had a force field.
Mark, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy. It's a sunny day here in Scotland, and so I'm happy.
I'm in Miami, so we also have a sunny day down here.
Ah, cool.
I have
Probably hotter there than
Yes,
Scotland.
yes. It's all year hot. I mean, we have like 60 degrees, maybe December, January, but that's still like
Yeah.
warm for you guys. I remember when I was like, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, I had my first exposure to Alfred Hitchcock. And I was watching a short clip that The Cure for Insomnia. And I don't know if you remember that. There was like The Cure for Insomnia and had like a revolver, and the pill, it goes into the chamber, and that's the cure for insomnia. And in my 9, 10 years old, I didn't understand what do you mean like cure for insomnia? And then I started figuring out how his style work. And you say something that's really interesting in an interview, that you wanted to be Alfred Hitchcock. And I think every director since Alfred Hitchcock wanted to be Alfred Hitchcock, because very few directors can tell a beautiful and great story locked down in a room. My favorite, it's Rear Window. And also you can create the same feelings in by Norway's Gary Grant being chased by an airplane. So why Alfred Hitchcock so special to you?
I think, like when I was a boy, I saw his films on TV, and I was one of those people, you would probably say now, neurodivergent. I was not good at words at all, but I was like very good at imagery and what I would call visual thinking. And then you come across this person, who isn't maybe the most intellectual figure in the world, but he could visually think like few people in the 20th century, like really few people in the 20th century, and so I thought, wow, I want to, be in that world. I just want to enjoy his entertainment, but I also want to see how his mind works, because we have to learn from each other, and I think I've learned so much from Alfred Hitchcock.
10 years ago, I think I found by accident a beautiful accident in a garage sale, a complete CD collection of Alfred Hitchcock silent era.
Wow.
And to me, it was like a discovery something new, because it's still the same suspense feeling with no words, like The Ring. I remember watching The Ring, and I was fascinated. Even The Rope, that he has two versions of the same movie. And also you have a movie that's about Orson Welles, where you write like a letter to Orson Welles. But now it's different, because it's Hitchcock himself narrating his life in comedy. Why making that choice? Because for me, something that characterizes Hitchcock, it's his humor, a particular kind of style humor.
I think you're right. For me as a filmmaker, you want to always find what the voice is. You have to ask yourself, who's telling this story? Who are we talking to? Why are we telling this story? In the case of the Orson Welles film that I made, I wanted to talk directly to Orson Welles, and I was in that world. I knew his daughter, so that's dear Orson Welles. But with a Hitchcock film, I wanted to imagine, Hitchcock coming back from the dead in the era of TikTok and the. I think, and 4K on our phones, and I wanted to imagine this man who was very funny, to how would he describe the world? How would he respond to the world? But also, how would he describe his own work? And I know I know Hitchcock's work very well, I'm sure you do, Ruben. But I just wanted to imagine being in his shoes right now in the 21st century and describing his work.
Do you think that he could have the same success that he had back in the 60s, 70s, nowadays if he's making movies?
I think that there's some things about Hitchcock that are so fundamental in the way of like visual thinking. Where do you put the camera to understand the point of view? And if you look at a film like Parasite by Bong Joon-ho, who won an Oscar, or if you look at Barry Jenkins' beautiful film Moonlight,
Yeah.
these are Hitchcockian films in some way, And if you go back a little bit to Brian De Palma, Hitchcock will, I think, always be with us. He will, those of us who love movies, he'll always be part of us in some way, I think, because he just really got down to the bottom of the well. He really thought about the fundamentals of what cinema is: point of view, desire, fear, solitude, all these things.
But to me, I think one of the beautiful things that he added to cinema history is the creative characters. These characters, they usually are doing something wrong, and they're trying to justify, and then they just get into a trouble in a situation, even though wanted. Like Psycho, like same Gary Grant, Northern by Northwest. My favorite Rear Window. It's just in a place, and this thing comes to you because you are too curious. And if you say something about Brian De Palma, I think Brian De Palma probably is the director that looks like more like Hitchcock. If we look at his movies, in Blowout, for example, I think that's a Hitchcock movie. And but it's because those details, little details about the character, about the situations, and but also who's the actor who has the voice? It's Alistair McGowan, right?
Yeah.
Put that conversation with him to create that. For me, I thought that you did it AI or something like that, but for me, just so special the way he narrate things and mix the humor with like kind of criticizing his own movies.
Yeah. Of course there was a pressure, not pressure, but there was a possibility of using AI, but I wanted to work in the real world if possible. And I went to the great British actor Simon Callow, and I said, who could do Hitchcock? Who could really get a frog and a frog? Yeah. And he said, like, there's, the best ear in the business, the best listener is Alistair McGowan. And so we asked him, we went to his agent and we said, would he consider doing this? And I heard nothing. And then my phone went and I got this message from, it just said, "Hi, it's Alfred Hitchcock." It was so exciting, Ruben, because you can spend ages casting something and we didn't have to look anywhere else. The very first person we asked was so good. And I'm sure you agree, it really it's completely convincing. And I know Hitchcock's granddaughters have seen this film, for example, so that's, a high bar, people who knew Hitchcock have seen this film, and I think they are very impressed by the voice, by the kind of humor, by the idea that this is a good re-encounter with the world of Hitchcock.
Because for me, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, I think we had like 3 movies about Alfred Hitchcock, all like in a period of 2 years. And to me, it was like a little too much.
I agree.
And now with your movie, it just feels like something fresh. Because we are on his space. Like, we are in his world because you created a Hitchcock world for the audience. So I felt it that I was having a conversation with Hitchcock, like just listening stories that he has to tell about his movies.
Well, thank you for saying that. I agree. I was reluctant to make a film about Hitchcock because there've been so many films, so many books, etc. And like, why do we need to hear about another famous filmmaker?
Okay.
But there are new things to say, and the world changes all the time, and we can look back at Hitchcock in new ways. And there was no way I would have done this if I was just repeating what we know about Hitchcock. I realized that there's new thing to say, and I made this film partly during COVID and in the lockdown period, and so I wanted to look at watching Hitchcock films in that environment meant that I was interested in solitude, which we all felt during COVID, and fulfillment, and some other themes, other ways of looking at Hitchcock.
But you have based also your career as a director writing letters to cinema, the history of cinema, the story of film. Orson Welles, now Hitchcock. I forgot the other one that you have, but why this love for cinema? What do you think that cinema is so important and so special? Because basically it's the youngest form of art that we have, and we're still discovering new things. Now we have streaming. Now we have IMAX. We have, like, I don't know what we're gonna have in 5 years. But it's changing so fast. But for me, it's just changing based on business more than based on love for cinema. Why choosing cinema to express yourself, and you're making emphasis in how important is that we care about cinema?
Well, cinema is in the world like a sunset or a pizza or, Aretha Franklin song. They're all there, and they're all part of our lives. They all, are ways of nourishing ourselves. The cinema, for those of us who, are more visually based, when you go into a movie theater, Ruben, and you sit down, and the darkness falls, and the pressures of the outside world disappear. You're in a safe place, a kind of harbor, a shelter from the storm, and you can feel things. It's safe to feel emotions and desires and even transgressive qualities that, in the real world we don't often feel. So cinema is crucial, and it's a great art form. It's very good for mental health. It's very good for all sorts of things. Cinema had to exist. It had to. When it came along, quite quickly people thought, wow, of course we want to see emotions bigger than life in a safe environment.
I'm glad that you mentioned Parasite, because I remember I watched this movie back in Cannes at the festival. I was one of the first. I don't read anything or watch any trailers when I'm in a festival. I like to be surprised. I like to be amused for a movie. And I remember the feeling watching Parasite that I didn't want it that the movie ends. I wanted to stay in that world forever.
I completely agree, and I think that Parasite, that sense of, the kind of the rich world and then the poor world underneath, but the idea of transgression,
Yes.
And admitting to your desires. Hitchcock really asks us to identify with these beautiful, glamorous people in his films, like, Ingrid Bergman or Cary Grant or, Grace Kelly, but also he wants us to understand how close their glamorous world is to something more scary and vertiginous. And so Parasite does that beautifully.
And Hitchcock, something that I got from him, it's also how he treat women. Like he gave a word to women. He gave a power to women. The women also can be criminal. Women can be also do wrong things. Yeah. Because before we only have glamorized women, we have these kind of stories where Hollywood used them as stars. Just stars, they always have to be like femme fatale or something like that. But Hitchcock giving him power in, like, we can do those things too. I mean, probably don't get away with it, but also like Grace Kelly in Rear Window, like she's part of this of what's going on. But also the relationship that they have with their partner or their friend, it's kind of like an accomplished thing. And and he never wrote. This is something that I had a conversation with many of my critic friends. There's some directors that usually don't write scripts, but they author. And I think Hitchcock is one of those first. They rarely wrote a script, but you can tell when a movie, it's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Even he never wrote the script, but the way he portrayed this in camera, that's his pencil. The camera was his pencil.
Yeah, I agree with quite a lot of what you've just said. I'm a passionate feminist, and I made a big 15-hour film called Women Make Film. And of course, lots of people who think they know about Hitchcock, think that he always treated women badly. Now, there's no doubt that he treated Tippi Hedren badly. There's no doubt it's disgraceful, shameful what he did. But if you actually look at the evidence, he worked with more female writers and producers than most filmmakers of his time. And I knew Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho, and she loved him. And I knew Teresa Wright, who was in Shadow of a Doubt, and she loved him. And going way back, and Ingrid Bergman loved him. So it's easy to misrepresent Hitchcock's relationship with women. I think it's much more interesting than the muckraking journalists say. I notice my camera's going out of focus, so I'm going to try to get it in focus.
Directors.
I know it's terrible. Yeah.
No,
I think that, like, if you think of a film like Notorious, think of a film like Suspicion, think of the early films, think of that, the very first film, The Pleasure Garden, a lot of his, and Marnie, and Birds, a lot of his film are actually interested in the female agency and what the women feel in the world. So I think we need to make sure that we don't follow the mistakes of the right-wing press saying he was horrible to women.
No, when I refer about women, it's about their characters, how he create characters for them. Because you say Tippi Hedren in Vertigo, but to me, Vertigo is a masterpiece. I have seen this movie. I have used it for examples of for me, movies that everyone has to see in how to create feelings without using visual effects and craziness, because the whole movie is about their characters and their feelings. And with James Stewart from the beginning, what he's suffering, and then everything happened in the movie. But for me, it's like I had never seen before Hitchcock, a director, that treat women on their characters wise the way he did it with all his female characters, or most of them, and in his movies.
Just a reminder that it's Kim Novak and Vertigo.
Kim Novak,
but yes,
Vertigo, yes. But sorry.
But I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles with Janet Leigh, and she wrote a great book on Psycho, and she plays Marion Crane in Psycho, and so we have to listen to the evidence on this. And what Janet Leigh says about Hitchcock and her character is, powerful and very interesting. Again, we have to say he treated Tippi Hedren really badly.
Yeah.
There's no excuse, no defending, no but what you have to then ask, did he treat other women equally badly? And the answer, I think, is, as far as we know, as far as the evidence is, no.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. I'm really happy that we had this conversation, because I've been following your work for so long, and I have learned so much from you, from your creations, because the story of film and Orson Welles opened my mind to different perspectives about many things.
I love it.
And I've been a film lover since I'm a kid, because my mom raised me basically watching everything that comes in the TV or in the movies. My most precious memories with her is watching movies. And your work now with Hitchcock, I just want to go back and watch all my favorite Hitchcock movies. And
is your mom still with us?
No, my mom died actually in like 5 days. It's like a 27th anniversary of her pass.
Okay. Well, here's a huge tribute to her, for she obviously did something very good to get you interested in cinema.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, Ruben. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.